This is the old trim cable out of the airplane, and I looked at it and assumed that there was not much wear on it, but once I get to looking at it on the magnifying glass, I can see that there's more wear on it than I thought. There's some places where it rubbed on stuck pulleys and whatnot. This is a continuous loop cable. The cable basically spliced together in a continuous loop. I'm going to splice a new cable together, and it's been 40 years since I've done it, so I've been reading up on it a little bit. This is 16th inch cable, so it's pretty small. Most of the cables I've ever done, the strands are made up of stuff like this, so this is a little bit tougher to do. I found the original splice in this cable, and I've been looking at it, finding all of the places where they tucked cable in and stuff, basically to get an idea of how much to use for the splice and how to tuck it all in. I cut a piece here a few days ago and was trying it just to get a feel for it. They've got pretty long splice here. Well, it's supposed to be a long splice, but it's quite a bit longer than what I was initially working with. So each one of these is where the tucks were made on it, and then you can see there's a little kink here where the strand that gets tucked in, where it comes to and ends, and this one here goes here and ends. They meet right there. So that'll give me a good idea. I'll make some practice splices here and see if I can't get this figured out and make a new cable up. Trying to teach myself how to do a long splice in wire rope in a cable. I think I'm getting it to where I'm doing okay. Right now for practice I'm using 1/8 inch cable. You'd think a small cable like that would be easier to use, but it's not. It's, for one thing, it's hard to see, but the other, all the strands are small and everything, and it doesn't have the spring back that a larger cable might, as far as going back into the coil. This is fiber rope, and this is an I-splice. You can do that in wire rope too. A little bit different technique, but not too much different. And this is a turned back end. That's also considered a splice. This is wire rope, and these eyes are considered splices. I never did consider these splices, they're swedged on ferrules, but it is technically considered a splice. A short splice like this is good to make a loop, a sling. The splice winds up equal in the strength of the rope, whereas if you use a knot in there, you're reducing the strength of the rope by whatever the type of knot that you use is. But a splice like this doesn't. So this is a short splice just to make a sling. If you wanted a splice that was going to run through a sheave, a block, or an eye, something like that, then this increases the size of the line quite a bit. It's an abrupt change, so it makes a bumpy ride through a block, a sheave. If you have one that's sized for the size of the rope, then this might be too tight to fit through the sheave. This is another type of considered a splice in a cable, and that's a Nicopress sleeve. But if you're going to run something through a sheave or block, you need a long splice. This long splice doesn't increase the size of the cable by very much. It keeps the strength of it the same, and so that would run through a block pretty well, and that's a lot better than running something like that, trying to run something like that through an eye. That's 1/8 inch cable. Here's one in 16th inch cable. This is where I practice, and I didn't do quite so well. This side over here is starting to get better at it. That actually turned out pretty good. So there's two reasons to make a long splice in a cable. One, of course, is to make a loop like this. And another reason is to join two cables together to make a longer cable like this. I did this once, or helped do this once, about 40 years ago. We made a long splice in a cable. I was working on a jammer logging in the woods. Jammer is a cable yarder that was a kind of Idaho jammer. They were used there in the North Idaho, Western Montana, Eastern Oregon, Washington for logging quite a bit. And they're not near as big as the yarders they use on the West Coast. So we used smaller cable. One time we had the haulback line skipped off of the sheave and ran through the frame of the block. Well, and when it does that, it curls just like taking a piece of ribbon and run it over a piece of scissors to make a bow or a curl on a gift package or something, and it ruins the line. So we cut out the bad part of the line and spliced the lines back together in a long splice like this so it'd run through the sheaves. Like I said, that was 40 years ago. I didn't do it myself. I just helped, mostly by holding on to the ends of the lines. Now there's some tools you need to make a splice. Of course, you want something good to cut your cable with, and for bigger cable, I couldn't find it. I've got a cable cutter that's a big cast iron base, and it has a knife that slides through it. You run the cable through and take a big hammer and hammer on that knife blade to cut down through the cable. Back when I was a kid, when I was working in the woods, if we had to cut a cable, we'd take a double-bitted axe and drive it into a stump, and then lay the cable over the top of the double-bitted axe and then beat on it with a hammer or a single-bitted axe, something like that, until we cut through the cable. Now that worked, but it's kind of messy. For these small cables, there's different ways you can do it. You can cut them with a pair of dikes or something. They're hard and it makes a mess. You can cut them with a abrasive wheel on a grinder, disc sander, or a Dremel, something like that. Or you can use a set of these cutters like this. These seem to work the best. These fit around the cable. They go around the whole cable, nearly surrounding it all the way around, and hold the cable pretty tight. And when they make a cut, then they don't broom the end of the cable very bad. It doesn't come unraveled on it, so it makes a pretty clean cut. There's the other end there. So another thing you need to work on the cable is you need some type of tool to spread the strands apart so you can get them opened up and work on them. And these are a couple of marlin spikes. There's smaller ones. This one, you can see it has a kind of a spade point on the end of it for getting down between those, and it's sharp, a little, not real sharp, but sharpened, so to get down between those strands on the cable. And you'd use a hammer on them. For big cable, you need something, hammer on them to get them to slide through there until you get it opened up. For fiber rope, you can use a marlin spike or you can use a fid. Now, this is a commercial type fid. It's got a metal trough in it. You can fit it down between the strands of the rope and open them up, and then you can slide your strands down this to get them through there to make them feed through a little easier. For this small cable, this is what I'm using for marlin spikes. These two little scribes, probes, dental picks, whatever the heck they are. You also use a little screwdriver once in a while if you need to open it up quite a bit. So this is a search, a Google search for wire rope splicing. When I put wire rope long splice in there, it comes up with a bunch of stuff, but then most of it winds up being fiber rope stuff. There's a Navy manual and a couple others. I downloaded those, and they don't really have the information I was looking for. The best manual is this one here. It's from the WorkSafe, Workers' Compensation Board in British Columbia, and that has a lot of good information on it on splicing. This one has an article in it on long splice, also called a running splice. I downloaded the book, and this is the instructions as it comes in the book on how to make a long splice. And that helped a lot. It took me a while to understand everything that it said. Looking for YouTube stuff, and there really wasn't a whole lot. There's a lot of stuff on YouTube on making eyes and doing all kinds of other stuff, but there's not anything on long splicing. I did find one video, this one right here, on splicing a 1/4 inch rope. It winds up being mostly about just tucking the ends in here, these ends, and how to untucking them in. It doesn't explain anything. There's no audio on it. They've got a bunch of cheesy music on there, and it just goes through visually, and they're using a 1/4 inch 7x19 wire rope, and that is pretty good. There was another one that I found that showed the whole thing. I can't find it now. I found it several months ago, but it was Japanese, and it was in Japanese or Chinese or Klingon or something like that. I don't know. It was all Greek to me. You could watch it, but there was no instruction on how to do it. And I wished I could find it now that I have a little better idea what's going on than what I had before. But this is pretty good. It shows pretty good on how to roll the strands into the wire But that's the reference I had. Otherwise, I pretty much had to figure it out on my own. So I watched that, kind of keep that on, and I've got it figured out now, more or less. Not very good at it yet, but I'm getting it figured out. So it takes quite a bit of wire. See, this piece here was 2 pieces, each of them 36 inches long. And so by the time you get them spliced together, that's about how much wire you have, is 36 inches. Well, it depends on the size of the wire as to how long the splice is. In this manual, they're talking about doing a 7/8 inch diameter wire and running 60 feet. For this small wire, I don't have to go that far. One of the things they did talk about in here, it took me a while to figure out what they were talking about, but to say it's determined the length of the ends that a splicer wants to roll in, I couldn't figure that out, and then I finally figured out that this is what they're talking about, is what the length of the ends that you want to roll in, and these are the ends that you're going to roll in. So you figure out the length of those, and that determines how long of a cable you need. And this didn't say anything in it about how long you wanted the ends to roll in to be, but I did read in another manual something about a minimum of 10 times the diameter of the wire. So this is 1/8 inch cable, so 10 times the diameter of the wire is an inch and a quarter. And then they say in here that you want to go 12 times the length of the ends that you want to roll in, which would make this 15 inches that we need to go here to roll in. And that figures out about right. So you wind up with an inch and a quarter tabs on here to roll in, so that means you want at least 2.5 inches between these where these wires are separated. So you start with 15 inches, so we'll go 15 inches on that end and 15 inches on this end, so that means you're going to have to go 15 inches farther, so we need a total of 30 inches minimum of wire. So the first thing you do on here is take 3 strands and unravel off of this all the way back to the 15 inch. This section here with the 3 strands with the center strand in it is discarded. We don't use it anymore here, and we wind up getting rid of the center strand. So this one here we can cut off. We need an inch and a quarter on the strand, that one strand that's left there, to tuck in, but we don't need the rest of that, so we can cut that off and get it out of the way. And we do the same thing with this side here. We'll find 3 strands and unravel them, leaving 3 strands in the core. And we'll unravel this back to the 15 inch mark. Now we got the same thing on this side. We got 3 strands and we've got 3 strands in the core. We can cut that 3 strands in the core off. We don't want to cut it off too short because we need it long enough for that one strand there. And we'll take these and start mating them up together right here, and they'll just roll right in together. The coils where these 3 strands are, there's a space in there that's just perfect for these 3 strands here, and we can just wrap those together. This one here that gets out of the way, that's the 3 strands with the core, and we got 3 strands in the core here and 3 strands here. And if you just take and lay those 3 strands that are by themselves over and take this core and unwrap it, that wraps those 3 strands without the core right into the cable, nice and neat. This is where our junction with the 15 inch is right here, and so we've got plenty there now, and we can run a tuck right there. We'll do the same thing with this side. Just run that around there a few times, raveled up, and you imagine what it'd be like if it was a long wire. So that's all braided together into one cable there now. So now it's time to start making our tuck areas here. This is where our one strand is going to come out here. I'm going to cut this off again and get it out of the way, and this one off again. I want to leave it plenty long enough so that that strand that sticks out there is long enough to trim off, because it'll get broomed off. Now, to figure out which strands to leave here in this place, we want the top strand on this coil. This is the one with the 3 separate on it. This is the top one right there. We want to undo that one and leave it there. So we got to follow that top one, and as you can see, it's the top here, but it's the bottom when you get over to this coil. So you have to find that, and the top here, top here, follow that all the way out to the end and unravel it. Okay, there's the top one unraveled. That one gets left here, and we can cut it off so that it doesn't interfere with everything else so much. So I cut it off long, but get rid of that. Now we want, on this strand right here, we also want the top one cut off. That's the top one right there. So we'll follow it out, pull it out of the bundle, and unravel it. These two strands now get left right here in this spot. And we can take this, pull those wires out of the way, and go ahead and unravel that. And we want to go at least 2 1/4 inches again there, because we'll have inch and a, or 2 1/2 inches. We'll have at least 1 1/4 inches here on this line, and then we'll have 1 1/4 inches coming back this way on this one. And unravel that to there, and we've got plenty of room there. Give it another twist just for good measure, because we got lots of room. Now we want to do the same thing. We want to take the top one, that's this one. Now that one gets left there. I can go ahead and cut it off a little ways. And we'll do the same thing on this one here with the center in it. And that one goes on the other side of this one that continues on. That one goes on the other side of this one that continues on, and we can cut it off. And we'd also cut off this extra, these two here, because they're just going to get longer. Cut those off, get them out of the way. Now these two stay here. Go ahead and unravel the one with the core, and we'll go over here to the other side and do exactly the same thing. All of this is all made back up again, just like the original cable, all spliced together, 2 different ones, except there's no center strand in any of this. By taking the center strand out, that gives room inside of there for these tag ends to go. So they replace the center strand, but they won't go in there if they're curved. These strands all have a pre-bent curve on them. They're all formed so that they'll lay around this and stay tight in this coil around this cable. So you have to straighten these out, and on these smaller cables you can do it by hand, just by bending them. And this is one reason, good reason to leave them plenty long, is because when you do this you wind up brooming the ends of that. I found on the ends here, you just take this center strand and just unravel it over the top of that free strand, and that'll just pull that free strand right in there. Now you run the center strand back far enough that it's not gonna, that when you cut it, it's not gonna overlay that inside strand, and then cut it off. And then you just twist the wire, and that'll just roll right back in there into the center. So now you have a center strand here. The tag end of that tab, the end that's left is in there. That becomes a center strand in here that keeps the strength of the rope up. And when you pull on this rope, then that tightens down on that, and there's no way it's going to come loose. This is a little tougher for these rest of these strands to tuck them in. It takes a little while to get the feel for them, but one of the things you have to do, just like that one that we tucked in with the center strand, is you got to straighten these strands out. Now on the ends here, it's harder to get them straightened out, and they wind up bending up. And if you leave them like that, they'll wind up sticking out of between the coils, and you can't get them to stay in there. So that's one of the good reasons of leaving this long, to get the bend in it and working it. You can trim that off. This first strand got tucked in right there. It's tucked under right there. It comes around here and then gets tucked under right there. Now you can do this 2 ways. You can either pull this strand over the top of that one and tuck it underneath it, and then run it through as the center strand, run it down the core, or you can run it parallel to that one and run it through the core. Wrapping it over the top of the first one and then running it through the core gives you a little bit more pulling power, keep it from pulling apart a little bit more, so it winds up being a little stronger, but it winds up with a bulge on there that'll wear as it runs through a sheave or a block or an eye. It'll bulge out, and there's no way you can stop that, and that'll cause the cable to wear out faster. So if you've got enough, and we've got plenty here on this cable, enough of this strand to go into the core, and as this cable tightens down and pulls, it twists and it tightens down on that core. So if there's something pulling on there, there's no way that this, if this strand goes through there any distance at all, there's no way it's ever going to come out of there. So we'll start right here. We'll run this parallel to this other one so that it doesn't bulge out. And no matter what you do, there's going to be a little bit of a bulge there. So take my marlin spike, run down in there and open up that weave a little bit on there. So we want that opened up. And we'll take the other marlin spike, stick it through there. As that opens up ahead, that end will pop up in there. So you want to just let it go and not run over it with your marlin spike so you don't broom that end. So there is a nice weave. Let's get it. Okay, so that's one in there. The first one was easy. It rolled in with the center core. The second one, we had a little bit of trouble rolling that one in, but we got it. Now this one will go this direction, roll in there, and we don't want it to, it would be nice if it butted right up against that one, but we don't want it trying to overlap that one. So we'll take the curve out of this. The straighter that is, the better it's going to roll into that core. I have a little bit easier time with these than I do with going the other direction, and I probably could do all of this side, flip this over, and then do the other side. This end here is not getting done now. That's the mating side to that one. So I want to go in on the other side of that, pick up a couple of strands there, open that up, and then stick the other marlin spike in from this side, hold that open. Now it's going. Alright, so I didn't get the end of that all the way in there, so uncoil that a little bit and it popped right in. When it goes easy. If it doesn't, if you can't get it to go, then you have a hell of a time with it and you wind up fighting it, making it worse. But this one's going pretty good. It's been a lot easier if I'd have done it when I could still see. Still not sure what I was doing wrong on some of those, but I got a good joints there. Everything worked out good. It all looks really good. Just like the book says it will. I got that piece all together that I did as a loop, and it turned out really good. I don't know how it turned out really good because I was having trouble with the one legs there, getting those in, but I wound up getting them all in. Everything wound up being really nice. You got spots here where the two cables dive under together, and they're going to be bumped up a little bit. There's nothing you can do about that. Trim them down a little bit, but otherwise they're all in good shape. It's a real nice loop. Best one I made so far.